happens as well. Our next guest recently visited the southern border along with the House Homeland Security Committee. Joining us now to discuss what she witnessed and to share her take on the ongoing border crisis is Florida Congresswoman Cammack. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Hey, Bob and Heather, how are you guys doing?
Doing great. Well, I'd like to start with some of that information that Emerald was just talking about in terms of whose responsibility is the border and how she said, her words, that it was kind of a game of hot potato right now, and that the vice president, who originally President Biden has said was in charge of the border, has now confirmed, at least through Jen Psaki, that she will not be visiting our southern border on that trip that she makes to Guatemala and Mexico.
You know, that's just so frustrating. As an American citizen, this is outrageous. That all this finger pointing is going on. Oh, it's this person's responsibility. It's that person's responsibility. The American people elected this administration to lead, so they need to step up and do just that. But this notion that Secretary Mayorkas is making progress and he's doing a great job, I was just there. In the past 2 weeks, I've been to the border twice. And when Secretary Mayorkas went last Friday, Thursday timeframe, I asked the sector chief, I asked the Border Patrol agents all across the Rio Grande Valley sector, has he actually come and seen? He never left the airport. Let me repeat that. The DHS secretary, Secretary Mayorkas, he was too scared, too cowardly to actually face the agents that he is responsible for, and he refused to leave the airport in McAllen, Texas, never once stepped foot out on the border, never once in the field, and I am ashamed that he is our secretary. It is absolutely unconscionable what we are seeing down there, and just the thought that this is all finger-pointing games. The American people don't care about the finger pointing that's going on. We need this fixed now. It's time that somebody step up and lead and actually take responsibility, secure the borders, enforce the laws on the books, and get a workable policy back in place that was stripped when Biden erased all of the progress we had made under the Trump administration via executive order.
Congresswoman, what did you see down on the border? Give us a feel for what it's like now.
It's heartbreaking. It is the most gut-wrenching, heartbreaking situation you can imagine. I not only visited the lack of infrastructure that we have in terms of a border wall, but I actually went out in the fields, out into the brush with the Texas Rangers. I was out with the Border Patrol agents at midnight while people were walking up to us, reporting in for processing. I visited the what's called TOPS. It's under a bridge outdoor processing facility where they then take these kids, these young kids, into the Donna processing facility where they're held. These facilities are only meant for 250 people. They're housing 3,000. And this isn't some seasonal surge. I have reviewed the data, and this is literally an invitation to come here illegally. Well, most heartbreaking was talking to these kids. I myself personally spoke with a 9-year-old girl who was having a hard time even telling me her name. And when I couldn't really make out the words, I finally asked one of the agents, so what's going on here? And he said, she can't speak. Her vocal cords have given out. She was screaming because she was being gang raped. Oh. This is happening on our border. This is happening to kids. Their innocence is being stolen. The majority of the girls, more than 50% of the young girls that are in these processing facilities have been sexually assaulted. When they go through their belongings that they've carried for 20, 30 days from Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, they're finding birth control belonging to 10-year-olds because parents are sending them on these journeys with these cartel members, knowing that their daughters are going to get raped. The cartels are making $15 million a day. This is unconscionable, what is happening on our southwest border. We need every single American to really stand up and pay attention and put pressure on this administration to finally lead and take responsibility for the crisis that they have created at the border via executive order.
You know, Congresswoman, we were taking a look at some of the images of these facilities where all of these children are being held once they do get here, going through some of the things that you just mentioned that one little girl went through. Is there any type of treatment that they're then receiving once they get here, or are they just housed in these images that we've all seen?
So that's where they're being housed. That little playpen that you just showed, I have stood there quite a bit in the past 2 weeks, talking to the kids, talking to the agents. We have National Guard that is actually keeping inventory of diapers. Typically, just in the Rio Valley or the Rio Grande Valley sector, you have 1,800 agents. 900 of them have been pulled off of the border to actually babysit this very area that you're showing right now. This is what is so broken. These kids, this is the first time they're seeing a doctor. When they're processed, they see contract medical personnel, and they're checked for lice, for scabies, and they get a temperature check. Not everybody gets a COVID check. If they're exhibiting symptoms, 2 Border Patrol agents have to actually then escort that individual to a local hospital. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, these kids are receiving a little bit of treatment and care, but we're completely maxed out on resources, on personnel. They just don't have it. And HHS is supposed to be taking responsibility from these kids from CBP, but that's just not happening in the 72-hour period that they have really set up by law.
We have about
I will
30
say,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I know we're running out of time. I just got to say, though, when I was leaving McAllen, Texas to fly back to Washington, on my flight alone, I had 24 kids and 6 infants, all holding a manila envelope that said, "I do not speak English. Please help me find my plane." Once these kids get processed and HHS tries to locate some relative or somewhere in the United States they can go, they buy them plane tickets. And they just
Can I ask you something, Congresswoman? Where did those kids come from? You're saying you were on a plane with these kids with that envelope saying, I don't speak it. Who were those kids?
Those were some of the kids that we had actually just picked up the night before in the field. I recognized a man and his son, Eber and Isais were their names. They were on my plane the very next day going from McAllen, Texas to Baltimore.
And so why were they on the plane? Where were they supposed to end up eventually?
So that's the question that nobody can answer. They get plane tickets purchased by different NGOs, Catholic charities, and they just kind of disappear with a notice to appear. And that's the unfortunate thing, is we have no way to track where these people are actually going. When I was in Houston, there was a young woman, 22 years old, from Honduras with a 2-year-old daughter. She came up to me. She was very confused. She didn't know where she was supposed to go to get her connecting flight. She was going to San Francisco. These are all things that they're very confused. The cartels have given them numbers of people to call and say, hey, tell them that your sister is in San Francisco. The person that HHS called was not that young woman's sister. It was just a member of the cartel pretending to be. And this is part of the payment, that $6,000 that every man, woman, and child has to pay the cartels to come to the United States. The system is broken, and we, the American government, are helping facilitate it. This is why every American should be outraged.
There had been some discussion, and I'm not sure where it went, in reference to doing maybe some DNA testing to see if you could prove that these children were related to the people that they were being sent to. Is that being done?
In some cases it is, where there's some red flags that pop up. I actually was there for one of these situations. There was a man who was picked up in the fields, and it was about midnight. The next day I was at the Donna processing facility, and the agents pulled me aside and said, during the interview process, there were a couple red flags. And so when we told him we were going to run a rapid DNA test on him and his daughter, he admitted that little girl was not his child. I have to give a shout out to Marinette Miller Meeks, my colleague from Iowa. She called it. We were standing there at that moment in time in the field when these migrants came up to us, and the little girl looked very uncomfortable, and she said, I don't think that little girl belongs to that man. And lo and behold, that next morning in the Donna processing facility, we were told that little girl was not his daughter. So he got sent back. He was returned. But now that little girl, that 3-year-old little girl, is in the Donna processing facility all alone.
And why did they arrive with kids that aren't theirs, which we're assuming some money exchanges hands, they show up with a minor? Yes. Why are they doing that?
It's called child recycling. I call it trafficking, but the official term is recycling. The policy that has now been instituted by stripping the MPP, the Migrant Protection Protocol, that was the Trump answer to really stem the flow, it was stripped via executive order. Basically, we are now in a position where if you have a 6-year-old or younger and a single adult, they can come in and they will go through the processing and eventually be released with a notice to appear somewhere in the United States. If the child is over 7 years old, they are not allowed in. If the child is over 7, they typically come by themselves without an adult. So what you see are these children coming across with folks. They're 6 years old or younger, and they are paired up with an adult. They get through the processing, then they get flown back to their country of origin, be it Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and they then make that journey again. I'm talking 3, 4-year-olds are making this harrowing journey, getting abused along the way, and then they get matched up with another adult that they are basically helping get across, pretending to be their child. The child is just a pawn in this scheme that the cartels are pushing. And 9 times out of 10, the adults that are coming along with them they're carrying narcotics. They are carrying something illegal that they're trying to smuggle into the country. It's absolutely unconscionable what's happening to these kids. But this is what this policy that the Biden administration has implemented, this is what they're incentivizing the cartels to do. Traffic kids under the age of 6.
It's unbelievable.
Yes.
Congresswoman, thank you so much. We went a little long because your stories were telling, and people need to know the facts.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing these stories. Thank you.
Thank you.